Plus. It's new and sophisticated, and one of the biggest questions is going to be, how does it stack up against the iPhone? So let's find out. I'm also launching a mega Galaxy S10 giveaway with everything Apple Pro. Rules will be in the description below. So, both phones are structurally sound, solid with no flexing, but the iPhone feels comparatively bulky. The thickness is almost identical, but at 208 grams, the iPhone almost feels a little awkward in contrast with the 175-gram S10 Plus. And Samsung's curves are a little more palm-flattering, so it fits around the hand. Both phones are IP68 rated against water and dust, but Samsung wins a few points here. It keeps the headphone jack and still offers microSD card support, up to an extra 500 gigs. If the display is important to you, and let's face it, it probably is, then I think the S10 Plus beats the iPhone in pretty much every category. Its screen is a fraction smaller at 6.4 inches versus 6.5, but it wins in a lot of key areas. It has a screen-to-body ratio of 93.1%, higher than Apple's 84.4%, and has an even higher peak brightness of 1200 nits, which, by the way, is one of, if not the brightest display on a phone ever, so even broad daylight is not going to cause a problem. The spin-off of this is that the new S10 phones all support HDR10+, which is kind of like a new standard for contrast, and so even though videos do look fantastic on the iPhone, this is another level. It's also a Quad HD Plus panel, which gives it a pixel density of about 530 over the iPhone's 458. Whether the average person will be able to tell a difference is a different question, but what you will be able to tell is that Samsung has replaced the notch with something I think is a little sleeker: the hole punch camera. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that the iPhone's notch isn't exactly there to look pretty. It contains a whole bunch of sensors that scan your face in 3 dimensions, making it pretty much the most secure way to unlock your phone. It has kind of a ridiculously low 1 in a million chance of failing, compared to Samsung's roughly 50,000. It's kind of personal preference which one you prefer, but just bear in mind that with the iPhone, there's no option for fingerprint unlocking, and with the Samsung, you don't have the option for any kind of 3D face unlock, including iris scanning, which has been dropped for these phones. This is the first time we're seeing an ultrasonic in-display fingerprint scanner though, which means it will be more reliable than most equivalents, and even work when your hands are wet. Cameras. The iPhone XS Max has very recognizable looking images. Because of Apple's implementation of Smart HDR, pictures almost look a little artificial, but consistently good. Samsung's is different. The S10 Plus introduces a triple camera setup which has a standard wide angle and a telephoto lens, just like the iPhone, but with a third ultra-wide lens. And with a 123-degree field of view, this is one of the widest ultra-wides I've ever used. You can fit a lot into one frame. It's a little early to say anything conclusive about camera quality, but from the time I've spent with it, the image quality and the image processing looks pretty similar to last year's versions. But the live focus portrait mode is noticeably better. Neither phone has a dedicated night mode that you can switch on at will, but the S10 can take long exposure night shots. You just can't decide when. You have to wait for the AI to decide when it thinks it's dark enough. Samsung also mentioned that the S10 is their first phone that can shoot super steady video, but what exactly that means, we're gonna have to spend more time with it to find out. You've probably noticed by now that the S10 Plus has not 1 but 2 cameras on the front, which theoretically means more reliable portrait selfies. But the iPhone does already do this pretty well with just 1. In fact, the iPhone has the ability to capture high dynamic range better than almost any other selfie camera, and from what I've seen so far, that remains true compared to the S10 Plus as well. But again, need a bit more time with that. Depending on which region you get it in, the S10 Plus is going to be powered by 8 gigs of RAM and either the Snapdragon 855 or the Exynos 9820. Both powerful chips, but the comparison with Apple isn't exactly one where people reach a consistent agreement on. The benchmarks will tell you one thing, but they're not really built to compare scores between iOS and Android. Essentially it's close. I've used devices with all these chips, and probably the safest conclusion is just that whether you go for the iPhone or the Samsung, you're getting bleeding edge mobile performance. Samsung has got a vapor chamber inside for extra cooling, but to be honest, in my opinion, the most underrated feature here is support for the next generation of Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi 6, which is not just faster but can keep up even in congested areas like stadiums or conferences. As well as the standard S10 Plus, there's also an Ultimate Performance Edition, which will probably also be the ultimate expensive edition, with 12 gigs of RAM and up to 1 terabyte of internal storage. So, you probably know that the iPhone XS Max is running iOS 12.1, and the Galaxy S10 Plus is going to ship with Android 9. You've probably already made up your mind over which operating system you're into. Android is open and customizable, and iOS is very slick but tightly controlled. I do like Samsung's new One UI skin, much cleaner and more intuitive, and the phone comes with a new and improved Bixby Smart Assistant, which will go head-to-head with Apple's Siri. The one unambiguous thing worth mentioning is that the iPhone is going to stay up to date for longer. Judging by their past history, you'll probably be getting the latest iOS updates for at least 5 years, but more like 2 years if you get the S10. Then again, I imagine people who are spending this much money on a phone are probably going to be upgrading every 2 to 3 years anyway, so not a deal breaker. Battery-wise, it is a massive win for Samsung. Both phones charge wirelessly, but the Samsung can be placed against another phone and start wirelessly charging that one. I'm a little disappointed that they haven't upgraded the charging speed for years now. The S10 Plus still charges at 15 watts, which is kinda weak compared to phones that now charge with 40 or even 50. But it still wipes the floor with the iPhone, which comes with a 5-watt charger in the box, and takes 3 hours to fill it up, in an age where most phones will fully charge in 1. Even in terms of capacity, the S10 Plus's 4100 mAh cell is nearly 25% larger than that of this phone. But in real-world usage, the gap probably won't be that large. iPhones make very good use of the battery capacity that they do have. One thing Apple has really started focusing on is audio, and the iPhone XS Max is hard to beat. It uses both the bottom-firing speaker and the earpiece for audio with some of the widest soundstage and separation you can get on a phone. Samsung's is really good too though. You've got a similar dual speaker setup, and it's got Dolby Atmos support, so very cinematic sound experience. Okay, but maybe the most important thing is pricing. The Samsung is also cheaper. The XS Max starts at $1,099, and I'll drop the final Samsung prices in a comment below, but expect it to start at around $900, going up to about $1,400-ish for the fully souped up version, which is still, funnily enough, no more expensive than the 512GB iPhone. So, which phone do you think won? Don't forget to enter the giveaway, and as always, my name is Aaron, and I'll catch you in the next one.